We're now going to begin our discussions of the read location task, which in a separate thread of execution is going to invoke WeatherBug Web Services to get additional information about a specified zip code. Now, again, in order to use the web services, as we mentioned at the end of the test drive, you have to go to the WeatherBug website and you have to register for your own API key and insert it into this class, as well as our read forecast task and read 5-day forecast task classes, to make sure that we properly, or you properly, invoke the web services. If you don't give a valid API key with your requests to the WeatherBug Web Services, they won't give you back any data. Now, when you're interacting with web services nowadays, the vast majority of them are so-called REST-based web services that return data to you in either XML format or in JavaScript object notation format. And one of the things that makes REST web services easy to use is that a simple URL like that of a website address that you would normally type into your web browser will give you back the data that you need. And in fact, let's just go ahead and take a look at the web browser for a moment here, where I've actually shown you a REST web service call that we're going to make in the read location task class that's giving us back so-called JavaScript object notation data. And I purposely covered up my API key in this case, but at the end of this URL is my API key. When I hit enter after typing all of this into the address field of my web browser, what the web service gave back to me is this highlighted chunk of string-based data in JavaScript object notation format. Now, a JavaScript object notation object, consists of a set of key value pairs. And so here's a kind of a generic JavaScript object notation object. Each key value pair is separated by a colon. The keys are strings, and the values can be things like Boolean values, numbers, strings, other JavaScript objects, arrays, etc. And each key value pair is separated from the next with a comma, and all of the key value pairs are wrapped together into a set of curly braces, and that defines one JavaScript object consisting of a bunch of attributes and values. You can also have arrays which are delineated by square brackets, and within an array each value could possibly be a JavaScript object notation object, or it could be Boolean values, null, strings, numbers as well. So we have the ability, by nesting JavaScript objects and arrays, to create pretty complex data representations, but in a very easy to understand format that can then be parsed quickly and processed inside of our Android code or wherever we happen to be receiving the data of our web service call. Now, in the let's go back to the data actually for a moment here. So the JavaScript object that's coming back from the getLocation web service call for the zip code 01776 is a single JavaScript object that consists of one key value pair. The key is the word location, and the value is a JavaScript object. And within that JavaScript object, we have a whole bunch of key value pairs representing things like the city, the country, the state, the zip code, and even things like the latitude and longitude where the city of Sudbury, Massachusetts is located. Now, in our case, we only care about the city, the state, and the country for the purpose of what we'll be doing in the read location task. We're going to display that information along with the zip code in the single forecast fragment, or even in the 5-day forecast fragment as well. So let's go back over to our source code now and take a look at the beginning of the read location task class. As you can see, we have a number of import declarations, a couple of which are new for us. So for example, we'll be reading strings from an input stream reader. The input stream reader is going to use the URL that I just showed you in my web browser to open up a connection to that web service and read the data that the web service returns. We also have the Android util package's JSON reader class, which we'll be using to obtain the actual data from the JSON object that's returned. Now our class ReadLocationTask extends async task because we want to perform this in a separate thread of execution and return results back to the GUI thread of execution. And that again enables us to keep our GUI responsive while the possibly lengthy web service call is being processed. Within the class, we have a number of static and instance variables. The static string called tag is just for logging purposes in case we run into any errors while using the web services. And then we have a string representing the zip code for which we're going to perform the lookup. We have a context and a resources variable, and we use these just to get the activities context and resources objects so that we can use them throughout the rest of the class without having to call and get them every time we need them. And then finally, we have 4 other instance variables here, 3 strings representing the data that we're retrieving from the web service, and a location loaded listener, which is the object that will be notified once the location information is returned from the web service.